On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas loses by 20 to Cincinnati shorthanded in the Big 12 tournament.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Johnson, you can give me a follow on social media on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, and you can find our show here with Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day, no matter which and wherever you're listening to the show. We certainly do appreciate it. On today's show, we are going to be, breaking down what happened for KU in their 20-point loss. I think you kind of knew, and you might have had an inkling what was going to happen when they were without Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar, but certainly there were actually some positive moments as they kind of fought along the way and nearly had it in their favor at one point, but also things did not finish that way for KU, and a back-to-back 20-plus point loss for the Jayhawks. So we're going to be breaking it down, go to the game. What's next for KU basketball as they have a long layoff now before their next game. A little bit over a week and about half a week to Selection Sunday. Maybe that's good for a team that's a little bit beat up, but we're going to break that down on today's show. First, we are brought to you by Nissan. This episode is brought to you by the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out at nissanusa.com. So Kansas falls by 20 points to Cincinnati. And yeah, I do think the score ended up a little bit further than the game actually was. Like Cincinnati was kind of keeping like their starters in there at the end of the game. Even when Kansas like threw the walk-ons out there. And realistically, that was, I don't know, maybe closer to like a 12, 15-point game. But still, that was rough. And another one where it's just like, yeah, that wasn't great for KU. And unfortunately, there have been too many of those moments so far this season for this team. I thought it was very interesting. You heard Fran Fraschilla on the broadcast, who I know gets a lot of gruff from a lot of KU fans and stuff, but he kind of went in on Bill Self for, that this is kind of on the coaching staff too. And I don't necessarily think he's wrong there. Like at the end of the day, you as a head coach in college basketball, you're in charge of building your roster. You know what I mean? So the roster faults, part of it's NCAA, right? Because you had the scholarship limits, but you didn't have to take all the scholarships in 1 year. You could have spread it out one and one. You could have done this or that in the transfer portal. How many other targets did they have in the portal, whether it's like Harrison Ingram or Jalen Tyson or I don't know, on and on and on down the list that ended up having great years at other schools that you didn't end up taking, whatever. I actually, as far as the game goes, I thought Kansas played well the first 10 minutes of the game, but they were down. It was like 25-18, 22-18 before they hit a three. I think then 27-18. And even through that moment, I was like, they're not even playing that bad. Cincinnati's just hitting some tough shots. Cincinnati coming in Big 12 regular season play was shooting under 30%, about 29.5% from three-point range. And they were hitting a couple tough ones. Like there was that one, 26, 27-foot three from straight on. There was maybe another contested one or two in there. Like they were just hitting tough shots. I thought Kansas was actually playing okay. We have the talent deficit and they're just hitting shots and you're not hitting shots early in the game. And then it felt like Cincinnati started hitting more of those shots and that it maybe started to weather on Kansas. You lost confidence a little bit, and that led to a bit of an avalanche at the end of the first half to where Cincinnati goes up big. But give Kansas credit because even after that happened and that momentum shift, Kansas came back out at the start of the second half and played really well. Got it done on the defensive end. KJ Adams took over on the offensive end. He was excellent. That was really cool to see for him. And honestly gives me more confidence in the idea of next year, I would love to see your 2 5-men be KJ Adams and Flory Badunga and have, KJ maybe play 25 a game, Badunga play maybe 15 a game, or if it's an on night for Badunga, maybe you play 5 minutes of 2 big basketball if you really want to get extra minutes in there, but for the most part, play that way. I don't know. I really liked kind of the style of play that you had there. You just didn't have anybody around him that could make shots or make shots consistently. And then he obviously got hurt. And at that point, Cincinnati was going to start hitting shots again, and they did. And then he comes back into the game. Thankfully, he was okay because that would have been torturous after what's already happened to Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar. And then KU kind of lost all momentum. You couldn't hit water if you fell out of boat, which was kind of an all-game thing. But you at least had those stretches of good defense, and KJ Adams just kind of taking over on offense that carried it for you, and Cincinnati started to not miss everything over the second half of the second half and just kind of pulled away from there. So, I mean, honestly, like, the score looks worse, like I said, than the game actually was. And when you consider how much Kansas was down without both those guys, which, yes, you could say, like, okay, you know, you go back a couple years ago, Kansas in their title year, Ochai Agbaji had COVID, and he missed that, or I don't remember if it was COVID or flu, whatever. I thought it was COVID. Missed that game at Iowa State, and Kansas still won that game on the road. Like, you have to be able to overcome good players not playing and winning. It's a different situation for this team, though, because they are so thin. And again, that can go into the conversation of roster construction, which we can talk plenty about in the offseason, which might be sooner than we might have hoped. But nonetheless, defensively, Kansas was actually okay in this game. I mean, Cincinnati hit a lot of threes, but I thought a lot of them were tough shots. They got a lot of offensive rebounds. That was something you kind of knew was going to be the case coming in. You just tried to mitigate it as much as you could, and especially after KJ got hurt and here, there, and without Parker Brown really being able to play a big role, that was going to only be even worse. But you held them to 38% shooting. Like, you had that nice stretch at the start of the second half that allowed you to get back into it. This just came down to Kansas couldn't do anything on offense. And if you get just a average performance, I would say, like a season-long performance from Johnny Furphy and Dewan Harris, you might have ended up winning this game. I know that sounds crazy. You lost by 20, but I don't know. At the very least, it's close down the very stretch because KJ Adams is good enough for you to do that. Your defense, honestly, overall, even with them hitting shots, and some of those numbers are even boosted by them hitting shots at the end of the games against your walk-ons, might have been good enough. But 34% shooting for Kansas. They were just 3 of 20 from 3. And Kansas now is really limping to the finish line here. 22 of 82 from 3 over their last 5 games. They had never been a high-volume three-point shooting team this year. I guess in the non-con, they were a good efficiency shooting three-point shooting team, but, you know, that kind of fell off as the season went on for them. They basically, you know, we know this isn't a great three-point shooting team. Certainly you expect them to be better than 26.8% over those last 5 games. But it does bring up the question of, with a team this thin, you know, do you get worn down as the season goes on? It's not just the injuries, but it's even the guys playing. Do you have more tired legs and you're not able to make those shots as consistently? I don't know. You did have more turnovers than them. You had 9 less points off turnovers. No one could hit an open shot. Dewan missed a bunch of layups around the rim. Furphy and Timberlake couldn't hit open shots. KU couldn't hit contested shots. No one could create shots for Kansas. The one guy who was actually kind of creating shots, to be honest, was Elmar Jackson. Like, he was the one guy who off the dribble was able to get to separate and get himself an open shot. Unfortunately, he couldn't make them. So it was like the move was good, but the shot wasn't going in. And the lone exception to all those, obviously, was KJ Adams. That doesn't apply to jump shooting because that's not what he does outside of, I guess, those little elbow, you know, mid-range jump shots. But honestly, the style of play, like I said, I think you actually could have something there. Like, hypothetically, if Nick Timberlake was the guy that you thought was coming in from Towson, 40% from 3, and, you know, Furphy was more of the guy shooting threes, he might just be hitting a freshman wall right now. Before the last 5 games, what we've seen from Furphy from 3, and Dewan Harris was the guy early in the season who was shooting, you know, high percentage on 3 on low volume, but could make them if, you know, you left him open. If that was what was actually surrounding KJ Adams in this game, I think it would have been actually like a very fun style of play, but unfortunately we didn't get to see that happen. And it was the complete opposite. It was a very not fun style of play with Kansas being unable to score the basketball. And Kansas has now lost 4 of their last 5 games. They've lost 5 of their last 7. This was the first time that they have lost by 20 plus points in back-to-back games since the early 1900s. This stat was found by Adam Sullivan. So shout out to Adam for finding this stat that, they lost 37-15 against Missouri on February 1st of 1919, and then they lost by 20 at Missouri on January 31st of 1919. So, I mean, you're talking about 100 years. That's not the kind of history you want to be making when it's a negative thing. So, I mean, it's tough to say what this means. It's pretty clear that if all the conversation that Bill Self had about, you know, Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar being back for the NCAA tournament, obviously, if that stuff's true, then it's a very different discussion than what you take away from this game. If that stuff ends up not being true and it's more of a ploy by KU to try to secure a better seed in the NCAA tournament, then things probably aren't going to go well for KU in the NCAA tournament, if today was any indication of that. But if Hunter and Kevin indeed are back, then you can maybe point to this and say, okay, well, that was nice to see KJ Adams go off. And that was nice to see Kansas show a lot of fight and show a bit of a competitive spirit, because that was something I didn't like in the Houston game. It felt like, there was kind of a give up there. There was no give up in this game. You were just kind of out talented or outmatched in a certain way. But I think the bottom line is kind of the same. Like, do you feel good about this team making it on a deep run in the NCAA tournament? Do you feel good about this team making it out of the first weekend? What about making it out of the first round, especially now that, they're at best going to be a 4 seed, at worst might be a 6 seed, where you're going to play a dangerous team hypothetically in the first round. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying they can't make a run to the Elite Eight if these guys are healthy and, everything kind of comes together. We've seen them beat some of the best teams in the country. And obviously the NCAA tournament is weird. And I'm not saying what are you hoping for. I'm just saying objectively, if you do take a step back and be real here, what is the real expectation? Like, what should the real expectation be? You know what I mean? Like, is the real expectation, can they make it to a second round? And anything on top of that is kind of a cherry on top. Obviously, you don't view it that way because expectations are high at Kansas and you are at Kansas and everything. But I don't know, man. Pretty far and away the worst team of the Bill Self era at this point. But I guess you got a new chance in the NCAA tournament to wipe that away if you can make it to the second weekend. All right, that'll do it for the opening part of this. Let's get to our GOATs of the game and then what's next for KU men's basketball as they await Selection Sunday. First, we were brought to you by Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. For instance, the Houston Cougars can be described as an Armada. The top-seeded team is as hardcore as it gets, so it's no wonder they're expected to land a top seed in the tournament after their first season in the Big 12. You can take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Just like Houston's trying to find their next big adventure, they're going to be trying to make it on to the Final Four. Shoot, Kansas is looking for just a new adventure in general. They would love to get in one of these Nissan Rogue, Pathfinders, or Armadas. You can go to shop if you're interested at nissanusa.com. All right, on to our GOATs of the game. Let's start with our good GOATs here. KJ Adams was fantastic. 22 points on 9 of 14 shooting, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block. It was good to see that he shook off that injury. I mean, honestly, if you had, at that moment in time, if you had to pick between, hey, is KJ going to be hurt or are you going to come back and win the game? I don't know if I phrased that right, but basically you would take the one where KJ's healthy, because at the end of the day, like, this win, maybe it's the difference between being a 4 seed and a 5 seed or something. I don't know. But that was good to see. But yeah, he was awesome. He was driving to the rim. He used his ability to say, hey, you might be taller than me, but I'm going to catch the ball at the 3-point line. And because you're a center and you're sagging off in the lane, I'm going to get a running start. And I am a locomotive when I get a running start. So you ain't going to stop me. I'm going to get to the rim. I'm going to either make a tough layup, or you're going to foul me, and they're not going to call it. But KJ Adams, really good game for KU. Jamari McDowell gets a good GOAT for Kansas. 7 points on 3 of 6 shooting, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. He actually, among KU's non-walk-ons, he had Kansas's best plus-minus of the game at -5, which that does not speak to a good game for Kansas. But I've understood, and I think I had this conversation about, 2-3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago on an episode, that I've understood for a while the idea of, okay, we're going to continue to go to Timberlake and or El Marco ahead of Jamari McDowell in the rotation, because the idea of, if we can get Timberlake right and being a 40% three-point shooter, would be so helpful on this year's team. That's not happening. And at this point, I think Jamari McDowell has the higher floor. I think he's a better defender than Nick Timberlake. He's a better rebounder than Nick Timberlake. And honestly, right now, I have just as much faith that he's going to hit an open 3 as Nick Timberlake. So I would prefer to see him ahead on the rotation. Now, with as thin as the team was in this game, everybody was going to have to play. So it really didn't matter as much, like who was going to play more or this or that. But I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. Jamari more than Timberlake. I guess the Patrick Cassidy 3, that's cool. Anytime a walk-on can hit a shot. Usually it's a lot cooler, though, when you're the team that's up by so much that you have to put in the walk-ons just to, like, not run up the score. So that's not as cool. And then, like I said, the competitive spirit. At the very least, that was something that I didn't like in the Houston game, that it felt like, for a lot of guys that wasn't there. In this game, I felt like that was there, even though you lost the game. And at the very least, like, that is something positive to take away here. The bad goats, Dewan Harris, I was super wrong. Coming into this game, I put him into Hawks to soar. I thought that he was set up to have a big game. And a reason why was, over the course of his career, he's had a lot of games where he's known when to score, when to pass. And I thought in this game he would be more aggressive. I guess he kind of was. He was 3 of 11. He took 11 shots. So he was a little bit more aggressive there. But unfortunately, he wasn't making the shots. He passed up a couple open threes to instead drive around, and it eventually ended up in like somebody taking a mid-range shot. He missed 2, 3, 4 layups. I mean, it was at one point for him for Schilla on the broadcast. He was like, those are shots he has to make, like that's just kind of part of it, especially right now. And he kind of said, like, what do you do if you're running an offense? Because you just set something up that you got Dewan Harris a slightly contested layup and he couldn't make it. If you're not making those, then like what plays are you calling? You're not making open threes either. It's like, what are you supposed to do? He also had a lot of turnovers in this game, 5 assists to 4 turnovers. So not a great Dewan game for sure. Johnny Furphy really struggled. 2 points, 1 of 8 shooting, 0 of 3 from 3. He had 8 rebounds to his credit, had some good defensive stats, though did give up a couple baskets on the defensive end, to say the least. So with Furphy, it's kind of been, I guess, that freshman wall, you would call it, over these last 5 games. He's shooting under 30% from the floor. He's shooting under 20% from 3. And like I said, I don't know if it's the freshman wall or if teams are finding something in the scouting report, but they need him to get going for the NCAA tournament. Elmar Jackson gets a bad goat here. The dunk was sweet, and that is unfortunate that we don't get to talk about this as much. If this is a game that Kansas wins, is it similar to like the Wayne Selden dunk against Baylor? I mean, the Wayne Selden one was more of like straight up posterizing the guy. It was like dunking on him, dunking over him. Whereas with Elmar, it was like dunking with a couple guys converging on him. But it was still an awesome dunk, man. And that was pretty sweet. If you take away that dunk, though, Elmar was just 1 of 10 shooting. He finished 2 of 11 for the game. 5 points, 0 of 4 from 3. Did have 9 rebounds. That was good to see him use his athleticism there and with the dunk. He also had 2 assists. He was, I don't know. I want Elmar Jackson to come back another year. And in this day and age with the transfer portal, you never know what's going to happen from both the player's perspective and from the team perspective. Are they going to kind of show the door to somebody? I still think something is there in the future for Elmar. You see the athleticism. Like I said earlier, he was able to create his own shot and get his shot, get to the spot he wanted to. He just wasn't hitting them. And so maybe with a full offseason, maybe this is something where Elmar in 10, 15 years ago would have been the classic guy that would have sat the bench and not really played much. And then by the time he's a sophomore, junior, would have been really good. But in today's day and age, and because Kansas is a thinner roster, they had to play him. And so we got to see a version of him which wasn't fully up to snuff. But anyway, it obviously wasn't a great game overall. And then Nick Timberlake gets a bad goat here too. 5 points on 2 of 9 shooting. Just couldn't buy a 3 until the very end when it was kind of little too late. I think he, in the 2 T-Mobile Center games this year, he's now 2 for 14, 4 rebounds, 1 assist. And again, I mean, how many open threes are like, maybe not wide open, but like pretty open, semi-contested maybe, threes did he pass up to give it to somebody else where you could tell there was a lack of confidence there for Nick Timberlake, and that's not what you like. He's in there to shoot threes for you and knock them down, and that hasn't happened consistently for Kansas so far this season. All right, what's next for KU as they await Selection Sunday and the NCAA Tournament on Locked On Jayhawks? Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us right here with the Locked On Network and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on the latest world of sports. you can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Learn more by visiting www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. That is amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. What's next for KU men's basketball? Well, they're done for. It's pretty crazy that you're not used to them playing on a Wednesday. Well, now they're not even playing on the Thursday or Friday and Saturday. So you're going to get to watch a lot of other college hoops around the country, I guess, or you can just deprive and just, take the time to yourself, do whatever you want. But Selection Sunday is coming up on Sunday. Kansas will be in the NCAA tournament. That feels good. That'll happen. There's a very real chance this becomes the new lowest seed or worst seed, I guess you could say, of the Bill Self era. Previously, it's a 4 seed, which has happened twice. Now, one of the years they made the Elite Eight, so maybe a little good juju there. The other year, lost in the second round by 1 billion points to Auburn. And it's possible they get a 4. It's possible they get a 5. I think resume-wise and what they put together, 4 would probably be the floor. But because you have the injuries with Kevin McCullar and Hunter Dickinson and you don't know what's going to happen there, it's not unthinkable that they could drop to a 5 or a 6. And it's something that Joe Lunardi was talking about before the game. And so Joe Lunardi before the game was basically on their studio show and saying that even though Bill Self said that these players are this and that, the tournament committee basically isn't going to take that as truth. They have to go based off of what they've seen. And that is a little scary for Kansas. That makes me think they might just end up on that 5 or 6 line. Now, honestly, I would almost take a 6 seed over a 5 seed. I guess you get going back to the good juju of the 1988 team maybe. But also I feel like the path of going, okay, if you're the 6 seed, maybe having to play, 11 seed, then maybe playing a 3 seed, then I don't know, is better than having to play the classic 5-12 upset game. Then you get a 4 seed, then you get I don't know. Maybe that's stupid, but it's late and things did not go well. Anyway, I think you're going to see Kansas between the 4 to 6 line, basically is what I'm saying. I think it's more likely they'll probably be like a 5 seed, but the ending matter of that is that they're not going to be in Omaha. They're going to have to ship out somewhere. Could they end up in Spokane? Could they end up in Salt Lake City? It's not going to be a super close destination for KU fans to go to, would be my assumption at this point, because you kind of lost that privilege with how you finished out the season here. All right, we'll be back later this week to break down maybe more on the tournament bracket, and Selection Sunday certainly will have an episode out to react to it for Kansas and get to that later in the week. Thanks for joining us here with Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for tuning in to each and every episode. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. See you next time with LOJ.